So I'm going to be showing you how to make some instomatic compost tea. So I've been trying to grow some seedlings and they are looking pretty sad. They've turned fairly yellowish. A good many of them have died altogether.
And broccoli seedlings, they've been struggling. They're very yellowish, but they've been holding on, gotten a little bit of size to them. Hopefully with the compost tea in a day or two, they will.
The reason is one of two things, I believe. The first reason is mainly, I think, due to the temperature. It's been 100+ degrees for over a month, and these are cool season seedlings. I've kept them under some dappled shade from trees.
So you see they get some shade, sun, and it's constantly shifting all day long. Keeps them cool, but it just hasn't seemed to help enough. The number two problem is maybe fertility issues. I've been giving them some weed water that may not be adequate. Well, what I'm going to do instead is probably what is the best instomatic homemade liquid fertilizer possible. If it's instomatic, if you have some homemade compost already. And I would consider this to be aerobic compost tea, not anaerobic. Okay, so let me show you what I do to cover my compost piles. First, underneath here is the compost. It's all wet and I want to keep a lot of the moisture, as much of the moisture in there as possible, but at the same time I need to let the compost pile breathe. You literally need to let the compost pile get plenty of oxygen if you want it to be an aerobic compost pile, especially when you load it down with a whole bunch of moisture from a water hose or something. So I get the pile all set after turning it, and then I'll put down a layer of cardboard, any type of cardboard, as long as it's not laminated or treated with some kind of plastic-based compounds or petroleum-based compounds. And generally your cereal boxes, your pizza boxes, you know, they can have shiny covers on them like this, but that is not from plastic-based material. That is from clay, largely obtained from China, I believe. But they put it on paper in the paper making process. They add a layer of it to keep the paper fairly well waterproof and also make it shiny and nice to print on. Anyhow, so after I put the layer of cardboard on top of the compost, then I put a thick layer of grassy mulch, dry grassy mulch. And another reason that the cardboard helps, if the mulch gets wet from a bunch of rain or something, it's still very easy to tell where the compost begins and the mulch ends because you have the cardboard in between the layers. But it still allows plenty of air to get through.
That's actually a very important point that came up just a few weeks back, because I decided to, for convenience sake, just cover a compost pile with plastic, sheet plastic, instead of this method with cardboard and mulch of some type. When I used the plastic, it basically caused the pile to go anaerobic. The pile heated up and was initially looking okay, but then after a couple of days I noticed that it didn't heat up nearly as much as I was expecting it to. Of course, I have a compost thermometer.
Now that is a compost thermometer.
To monitor this, and because it didn't heat up, I got a little suspicious, because I had made the pile, flipped it, turned it the same way I've always done, and it always heats up well above 130 degrees Fahrenheit, usually up to 150. And so it didn't heat up past, I think, maybe 120 or so. And so what I decided to do, I took the plastic off and I didn't add anything to the pile. I just flipped it. I just turned it to reintroduce the air. And then I covered it with the way I just demonstrated, with the cardboard and a thick layer of grass mulch on top of that. And without the plastic completely suffocating it, it heated up well past 130, probably in the 140 range. So that's pretty important if you're wanting that pile to sit there for a long time and not go anaerobic, which means it's not going to decompose very well, and the product that you get may not be nearly as beneficial to your garden. So anyhow. So this compost pile is 7 weeks old, and it's been turned 3 times. Each of those times it heated up, except for that first time I turned it and I put the plastic on it. But once I took the plastic off and turned it a second time, it heated up well above 150 and stayed above 150 for probably about 2 weeks. And then once it cooled down below 130, I turned it a third time and it heated up again, just a little bit, but it was pretty well done, burned through all the hot stuff, and so it just been sitting here for the rest of that time. Alright, so just a couple of small scoops of the compost added to the bucket. You can see the consistency of the compost. It's definitely, you know, less than perfect. All that woody material still highly visible in there, but it has plenty of nutrients readily available, even though it's only like 7 weeks old. And you can always do the smell test. It smells earthy. Nothing unpleasant at all about this, I guess, unless you don't like dirt, I suppose. But it means that it's been aerobic all this time. So, alright, the next step in this is where it gets instomatic. All you need to do is pour in some water and stir thoroughly. After that very thorough stirring, all you need to do is have a convenient way of filtering it. I like to put a piece of mesh cloth over it with a bungee cord around the bucket. That screen on there nice and tight. The easiest thing to do is this is by far the fastest thing to do, using 5-gallon buckets to get a nice amount of fertilizer. Don't mind my cracked old watering can here. Just want to get the maximum use out of it before I throw it away. So I got that. And pour it in. Here is a quick before and after comparison of a couple of broccoli seedlings. You can see before the tea application on the left that it is slightly more yellowish than the after on the right. In the 5-day interval, you can also see how much it has grown, particularly by comparing the size of this leaf here before and after, and this leaf as well. This batch of instomatic
compost tea is already about 5 or 6 days old. Let's see what the nitrate level is. Look at that. It's around the 250 parts per million range for nitrate. And maybe there's a tiny bit of nitrite in there. That, I think, indicates that it's starting to go slightly anaerobic as it sits there for days on end.
One of the best things about this instomatic compost tea is that it has absolutely no unpleasant smell whatsoever, in contrast to any type of weed water you're going to make. Even the method that I showed, the tea bag, giant tea bag method that I showed in previous videos, that still has a little bit of smell if you let it sit for multiple days, of course. But this method doesn't.
Here are the 2 seedlings on September 22nd. Since then, I've just been doing fertigation with very low concentrations of the compost tea.
Okay, so that's it. I just made compost tea and in like 5 minutes. Now, the idea of it being aerobic is simply based on the fact that the compost itself was aerobic, as I demonstrated by smelling. The smell test is pretty foolproof when it comes to that kind of thing. Anaerobic is going to stink, and your nose is very sensitive to those fumes that the anaerobic process, decomposition process, forms. Anyhow, so it's aerobic because of that, and the water, I mixed it in with the water, and hasn't had time to just sit there and go stagnant. So you use it right away, there's no bad smell, and make compost tea, aerobic compost tea, in like 5-10 minutes. Piece of cake. Instomatic. That is, if you have some nice compost to use. Okay, so thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already.